December 21st, 1939. Temperature, minus 40 degrees Celsius. The Kollaa River, eastern Finland. A Soviet officer raises his binoculars to scan the frozen forest ahead. His battalion has been tasked with a simple mission: push through the sparsely defended Finnish position and continue the advance toward Helsinki. Intelligence reports indicate maybe 30 or 40 Finnish defenders. His force numbers over 4,000 men, supported by tanks and artillery. The officer never lowers those binoculars. A single 7.62 millimeters bullet, fired from over 400 meters away, drops him instantly. The shot came from somewhere in the endless white expanse of snow and birch trees, but nobody can identify the source. No muzzle flash, no sound echo to trace. Just death arriving silently from a frozen wilderness. Over the next 3 minutes, 7 more Soviet soldiers fall. Then silence. The Soviets scan desperately for the shooter, but see nothing except snow, trees, and more snow. When they finally advance, cautiously, they find no one. Just boot prints in the snow leading deeper into the forest, and 8 of their comrades dead in the snow. They had just encountered something unprecedented in modern warfare. Not a platoon, not a company. One man, a 5'3" Finnish farmer who would, over the next 100 days, personally kill over 500 Soviet soldiers and become the most lethal sniper in human history. His name was Simo Häyhä. The Soviets would come to call him Bellius Smirt, the White Death. This is his story. And I promise you, every single detail you're about to hear is verified historical fact. To understand how Simo Häyhä became history's deadliest sniper, you need to understand where he came from. Born December 17th, 1905, in the municipality of Rajärvi in southeastern Finland, Simo grew up in a landscape that would define his life and legacy. The region was characterized by dense forests, frozen lakes, and winters where temperatures regularly dropped below minus 30 degrees Celsius. His family were farmers, but like most Finnish rural families, hunting wasn't a hobby. It was survival. Meat for the winter came from the forest. Simo received his first rifle at age 17 and began hunting regularly. Elk, deer hair, anything that could supplement the family's food supply. But Simo didn't just hunt. He became obsessed with marksmanship. He joined a local shooting club and began competitive target shooting. Finnish shooting culture was serious and methodical. Competitions weren't just about accuracy. They tested shooting in various weather conditions at different ranges and under time pressure. Simo excelled at all of it. By his mid-20s, Simo had won numerous local and regional shooting competitions. His specialty? The Mosinagin M/28-30 rifle, the standard Finnish infantry weapon. He knew that rifle intimately. Its weight, its balance, how cold affected the barrel, how wind pushed the bullet at different ranges. He also developed an unusual preference: iron sights instead of scopes. Most competitive shooters preferred scope rifles for their magnification and precision, but Simo recognized something crucial. Scopes had disadvantages. They could fog up in cold weather. The glass could reflect sunlight and reveal your position. They required you to raise your head higher, creating a larger profile. And in Finnish winter conditions, where you might be shooting in blizzards or twilight, iron sights were often more reliable. This decision, to master iron sights rather than rely on scopes, would prove decisive in combat. In 1925, Simo completed his mandatory military service in the Finnish army. He served in the Bicycle Battalion 2, learning infantry tactics, fieldcraft, and advanced marksmanship. The Finnish military, aware that they could never match the Soviet Union's numerical superiority, emphasized individual soldier quality over mass. Every Finnish soldier was expected to be capable of independent action, skilled in winter warfare, and comfortable operating in small, dispersed units. Simo absorbed these lessons thoroughly. He completed his service and returned to farming, but remained active in the reserves, attending regular training exercises. By 1939, at age 34, he was a skilled marksman, experienced outdoorsman, and trained infantry soldier. He was about to need every bit of that expertise. November 30th, 1939. The Soviet Union invaded Finland. Stalin's calculation was simple: Finland had been part of the Russian Empire until 1917, and he wanted it back, or at least wanted to push the border away from Leningrad. The Red Army would roll over this small nation quickly. The Soviets deployed over 450,000 troops, thousands of tanks, and hundreds of aircraft. Finland could muster only about 300,000 soldiers, with limited armor and air support. The world expected Finland to collapse within weeks. The world was wrong. Simo Häyhä received his mobilization notice on November 30th. He reported to his unit, 6th Company, JR 34, Infantry Regiment 34, and was assigned to defend a sector along the Kollaa River. His company's section of the front was approximately 4 kilometers wide. They had about 32 men to defend it. Do the math. 32 men defending 4 kilometers against Soviet forces that would eventually number in the tens of thousands. The Soviet strategy was straightforward. Mass attacks using overwhelming numbers to simply crush Finnish resistance. They advanced in large formations, supported by artillery and tanks, expecting to overrun the scattered Finnish defenders through sheer weight of men and metal. They hadn't accounted for the terrain, the weather, or soldiers like Simo Häyhä. The Finnish defensive strategy, born of necessity, was brilliant in its simplicity. They wouldn't meet Soviet mass with mass. They couldn't. Instead, they would use the forest itself as a weapon. Small, mobile units would strike Soviet columns, inflict casualties, then vanish into the wilderness before the Soviets could respond. Finnish soldiers on skis could move rapidly through forests where Soviet troops on foot floundered through deep snow. And for static defense of key positions like the Kollaa River, they would use snipers. Simo was assigned to sniper duties almost immediately. His reputation as a marksman had preceded him, and his company commander recognized that one skilled sniper could achieve more than a dozen riflemen in this terrain and tactical situation. Simo was given a simple mission: defend his sector. Kill any Soviet soldiers who attempted to cross. Do not let them advance. He set to work. What made Simo Häyhä so devastatingly effective wasn't just his shooting ability. It was his systematic, methodical approach to killing. Let's break down his technique, because understanding how he operated is key to understanding how one man achieved over 500 confirmed kills in 100 days. His weapon. Simo used a Finnish M/28-30 rifle, a variant of the Soviet Mosin Nagant that had been modified and improved by Finnish manufacturers. The rifle had several advantages. It was rugged and reliable in extreme cold, accurate to 500-plus meters, and Simo knew it intimately after years of competitive shooting. Crucially, he used iron sights, not a scope. This meant no scope glint to reveal his position, lower profile when shooting, head close at ground, no fogging issues in extreme cold, faster target acquisition at close to medium ranges, no scope shadow that could be seen by observant enemies. His position selection. Simo was meticulous about choosing shooting positions. He looked for natural concealment from surrounding terrain, multiple cover withdrawal routes, clear fields of fire towards Soviet approach routes, positions that put the sun behind him, in Soviet soldiers' eyes, locations near natural features that would confuse sound direction. His camouflage. Simo wore all-white winter camouflage, but he went further. He would pack snow in front of his position to prevent muzzle blasts from kicking up powder that would reveal his location, keep snow in his mouth to prevent his breath from creating visible condensation in the extreme cold, remain absolutely motionless for hours, even when not shooting, flatten his silhouette to minimize his profile against the snow. His shooting discipline. Unlike the Hollywood version of snipers, Simo didn't take difficult shots if easier ones were available. He was ruthlessly practical. He prioritized high-value targets, officers, radio operators, machine gunners. He took shots within his capability range, mostly 150 to 400 meters. He never took more shots than necessary from one position. He always had a withdrawal plan before taking the first shot. His physical conditioning. The temperatures during the winter war regularly dropped below -30°C, sometimes reaching -40. Simo would lie in the snow for hours, completely still, waiting for targets. The physical and mental toughness required for this is almost incomprehensible. Most soldiers would develop frostbite within an hour of lying motionless in such conditions. Simo had spent his entire life in these forests and knew how to survive them. He understood layering, understood how to position his body to minimize heat loss, understood when he needed to move to maintain circulation without revealing his position. Simo's first confirmed kill came on December 2nd, 1939, just 2 days after mobilization. A Soviet patrol was advancing through the forest toward Finnish positions. Simo, concealed in a snowdrift 200 meters away, waited until patrol entered an open area with no nearby cover. He selected the soldier in the center. Eliminating him first would cause maximum confusion, as soldiers at front and rear wouldn't immediately understand what happened. One shot. The soldier dropped. The patrol scattered, tried to locate the shooter. Simo remained motionless. Several Soviets ran toward cover, and he shot 2 more before they reached the tree line. The remaining soldiers retreated, dragging 2 wounded comrades. 3 kills in less than a minute. The Soviets never located his position. This pattern repeated daily. Simo would establish a position before dawn, wait for Soviet movement, engage targets methodically, then withdraw before Soviet artillery could respond to reported sniper fire. His kill count grew steadily. 5 on December 5th, 7 on December 7th, 4 on December 9th. His company commander began keeping official records of confirmed kills, enemy bodies that could be verified by Finnish soldiers. The Soviets, meanwhile, were growing desperate and frustrated. They knew a sniper was operating in this sector. They could see the casualties, but they couldn't find him. They tried counter-sniper teams. Soviet snipers with scope rifles were deployed specifically to hunt Simo. He killed them. The Soviet scope rifles created glint and required higher shooting positions. Simo's iron sights and minimal profile gave him the advantage. Artillery bombardment. The Soviets would saturate areas where sniper fire originated with artillery. But Simo was already gone by the time shells arrived, having established withdrawal protocols that got him clear in under 60 seconds. Mass advances. The theory was that overwhelming numbers would overrun any sniper position. But in dense forest, large formations became disorganized and provided even more targets. Simo would kill 10 to 15 soldiers during these advances, focusing on officers and anyone trying to restore order. Night operations. The Soviets tried advancing at night to avoid sniper fire. But Finnish soldiers, intimately familiar with their terrain, heard them coming. Simo would wait until dawn, then shoot the Soviet soldiers who were now trapped in exposed positions when daylight arrived. Nothing worked. By December 21st, 3 weeks into the war, Simo's confirmed kill count exceeded 100. The Soviet soldiers began talking about Belia Smrt, the White Death. Intercepted Soviet radio communications and interrogated prisoners revealed that Simo's activities had created genuine terror among Red Army units. Soldiers refused to advance in certain sectors, knowing the White Death hunted there. Officers struggled to maintain discipline when men were being killed by an invisible enemy they couldn't fight. The psychological impact multiplied Simo's tactical effectiveness. It wasn't just the soldiers he killed. It was the soldiers who were too terrified to advance, the time wasted on counter-sniper operations, the resources diverted to hunting one Finnish farmer. The Soviets became obsessed with killing him. They offered rewards for information about the sniper's identity or location. They deployed elite counter-sniper units from other fronts. They used artillery bombardments on suspected positions. They even tried using artillery against individual soldiers, an incredibly wasteful use of resources that demonstrated their desperation. One Soviet counter-sniper team of 12 men was deployed specifically to hunt Simo in early January 1940. They were equipped with the best rifles, the best optics, and had been told this was their only mission: find and kill the White Death. Simo killed all 12 of them over a 3-day period. The Finnish soldiers in Simo's unit were amazed and proud. Here was proof that individual Finnish soldiers could not just match, but exceed Soviet troops despite being outnumbered. Simo became a symbol of Finnish resistance, one ordinary man holding back the Soviet giant. But Simo himself remained focused and modest. When fellow soldiers congratulated him on kill counts, he would simply shrug and say he was doing his job. When officers suggested he might receive medals, he seemed indifferent. His concern was practical, defending his sector, protecting his comrades, killing as many Soviet soldiers as possible before they killed him. By January 15, 1940, his confirmed kill count exceeded 250. The broader strategic picture of the Winter War was increasingly desperate for Finland. Despite remarkable individual and unit performances like Simo's, the Soviets were slowly grinding forward through sheer numerical superiority. Finnish forces were exhausted, ammunition was running low, and casualties were mounting. But there was one sector where the Soviets made virtually no progress: Kollaa River. This was Simo's sector, defended by his undermanned company against repeated Soviet assaults involving thousands of troops, tanks, and artillery. The Finnish rallying cry became Kollaa Kesta, Kollaa holds, and hold it did, largely because Soviet forces attempting to cross were slaughtered by Finnish snipers, machine gunners, and small unit tactics. Simo was the most effective of these defenders, but he wasn't alone. The entire Finnish defensive strategy of using terrain, winter conditions, and superior individual soldier skills was proving devastatingly effective. The Soviets tried everything to break through at Kollaa. Massive artillery bombardments. They fired thousands of shells into Finnish positions before attacks. Finnish soldiers would shelter in dugouts and bunkers, then emerge when a barrage lifted to slaughter Soviet infantry advancing across open ground. Tank assaults. Soviet tanks would lead attacks, but the forest terrain channeled them onto predictable paths where Finnish anti-tank teams destroyed them. Disabled tanks then blocked the routes, creating obstacles for subsequent attacks. Human wave attacks. The Soviets simply threw thousands of men at Finnish positions, accepting horrendous casualties in hopes of overwhelming defenders. But in forest combat, numerical superiority meant less than in open terrain. Finnish soldiers would engage Soviet soldiers at close range, inflict massive casualties, then withdraw to secondary positions before being overrun. And through it all, Simo kept shooting. He developed a routine that allowed him to maintain operational effectiveness despite the physical and mental strain. Sleep during late afternoon/evening, warmest part day. Move to position before dawn, coldest part day, when Soviet activity was lowest. Engage targets through morning and early afternoon. Withdraw before dusk. Eat, clean weapon, plan next day's position. Repeat. This schedule was grueling, but it maximizes effectiveness while minimizing his exposure to counter-sniper operations. By February 1940, Simo Häyhä had achieved over 400 confirmed kills. He had become the most lethal sniper in modern warfare, and there were still weeks of fighting ahead. But the strain was showing. He'd lost weight despite eating regularly. The combination of extreme cold and constant stress burned calories faster than he could replace them. His face had become gaunt, with deep lines around his eyes from squinting through iron sights for hours daily. Other soldiers noticed he spoke less, seemed more withdrawn. This wasn't PTSD in the modern clinical sense. Simo never showed signs of the psychological breakdown that affects many combat soldiers. But killing 400-plus men, even when militarily necessary, leaves marks that aren't always visible. His company commander tried to rotate him out of frontline duty several times, suggesting he could train other snipers or conduct his missions from less exposed positions. Simo refused every time. His sector was his responsibility. His comrades depended on him. As long as Soviets kept attacking, he would keep shooting. The Soviets, meanwhile, had made killing the White Death their top priority in this sector. They knew his approximate operating area from casualty patterns. They deployed multiple counter-sniper teams simultaneously, hoping one would get lucky. They used Soviet snipers as bait, positioning them to draw fire and reveal Simo's location to supporting teams. On March 6, 1940, this strategy nearly worked. Simo was in his usual position, engaged in a long-range duel with a Soviet sniper team. He'd already killed one sniper, but the second was skilled and cautious, making only brief appearances. Simo was focused on this threat, waiting for a clear shot. He never saw the Soviet soldier with the rifle 150 meters to his left. The exact circumstances are unclear from historical records, but the result was catastrophic: an explosive round, possibly from a rifle, possibly from light artillery, struck Simo in the face. The impact destroyed his left cheek, shattered his jaw, and blew out several teeth. The force of the explosion threw him backward into the snow. Blood poured from the massive wound. His fellow Finnish soldiers, hearing the explosion and seeing Simo fall, rushed to his position under fire. They found him unconscious, his face a horrific mess of blood and destroyed tissue, but somehow impossibly still breathing. They dragged him back to Finnish lines, expecting him to die within minutes. Simo Häyhä regained consciousness 11 days later, on March 17, 1940. The fact that he survived is almost as remarkable as his combat record. The wound should have killed him. Most soldiers with similar facial trauma died from blood loss, shock, or infection within hours. But Simo's extraordinary physical conditioning and the immediate first aid from his comrades kept him alive long enough to reach field hospital care. The field hospital doctor who treated him later said, "I've never seen anyone survive a wound like that." His entire lower face was destroyed. By all medical logic, he should have died before reaching us. But Simo didn't die. He underwent multiple surgeries to reconstruct his face and jaw. The left side of his face would be permanently deformed, the cheek never fully healed, leaving significant scarring. His jaw required extensive reconstruction. He lost numerous teeth and would have difficulty eating solid food for the rest of his life. While Simo was recovering, the Winter War ended. On March 13, 1940, Finland and the Soviet Union signed the Moscow Peace Treaty. Finland was forced to cede about 10% of its territory, but it remained independent. The Soviets had failed to conquer the country despite overwhelming superiority in numbers and equipment. Finland had lost approximately 25,000 soldiers killed. The Soviet Union had lost somewhere between 126,000 and 167,000 killed. Exact numbers remain disputed. It was one of the most disproportionate casualty ratios in modern warfare. Simo Häyhä's final confirmed kill count, 505. This number represents only kills that could be verified by Finnish soldiers, meaning Soviet bodies in positions where Simo was the only shooter operating. His actual total was almost certainly higher, possibly exceeding 600 to 700, but those additional kills couldn't be confirmed. To put this in perspective, he averaged more than 5 kills per day. He operated for approximately 100 days. He achieved this in extreme cold using iron sights. All his kills were at ranges between 150 to 500 meters. He was never wounded until the final incident. No sniper in history has matched this performance. Simo was promoted to second lieutenant during his recovery, a rare battlefield promotion in the Finnish army. He received numerous decorations, including the prestigious Finnish Cross of Liberty. When he was finally released from hospital in 1941, his face was scarred but functional. He returned to his family farm near Ruokolahti and resumed farming. He never married, living a quiet life focused on agriculture and hunting. Finland fought another war against the Soviet Union from 1941 to 1944, the Continuation War. But Simo didn't participate in combat operations due to his injuries. He remained in reserves and occasionally provided training to Finnish snipers, but his fighting days were over. Journalists occasionally sought him out for interviews. His responses were consistently brief and modest. On his kill count, "I did what was necessary." On his technique, "I practiced shooting since I was young. When war came, I used those skills." On killing 505 men, they were the enemy. We were defending our country. That's all. On whether he had nightmares or regrets, "I slept fine." This last answer, "I slept fine," has been the subject of considerable analysis by military psychologists. How could someone kill 505+ people and sleep fine? The answer seems to be Simo's absolute moral clarity about the war's nature. The Soviets had invaded Finland without provocation. Every Soviet soldier Simo killed was an enemy actively trying to conquer his homeland. In his mind, there was no moral ambiguity. He was defending his country, his community, his family. That conviction apparently insulated him from the psychological trauma that affects many combat veterans. He lived quietly for decades, rarely discussing the war, focused on his farm and his dogs. He became something of a local legend, the old farmer with the scarred face who had once been the White Death. But he discouraged attention. One revealing incident occurred in 1998 when a Russian journalist tracked him down for an interview. The journalist asked if Simo felt any animosity toward Russians. Simo's answer, "No, they were soldiers following orders. Same as I was. The war is over. What's the point of hating?" Simo Hayat died on April 1st, 2002, at age 96, in a veterans nursing home in Hamina, Finland. He had outlived most of his Winter War comrades by decades. His longevity was remarkable considering his combat experience and injuries. Most soldiers who survive such trauma don't live to 96. His funeral was attended by Finnish military officials, veterans, and hundreds of ordinary citizens who came to pay respects to a man they considered a national hero. The Finnish Defense Forces provided full military honors. In death, Simo was remembered not just as a sniper, but as a symbol of Finnish sisu, a uniquely Finnish concept combining stoic determination, resilience, and courage in the face of impossible odds. Finland had faced a Soviet giant with a tiny army, impossibly outnumbered and yet held. They held because of men like Simo Hayat, who simply refused to quit regardless of odds or circumstances. Military historians and psychologists have studied Simo's case extensively, trying to understand what enabled his extraordinary performance. Several factors emerge. 1. Perfect skill development. Simo had literally decades of shooting experience before the war. He'd fired tens of thousands of rounds in practice and competition. This created unconscious competence. Shooting had become as natural as walking. He didn't need to think about mechanics. His body knew what to do. 2. Ideal physical characteristics. Simo's small stature, 5 feet 3 inches, was actually advantageous for a sniper. He could create smaller shooting positions, present a smaller target, and was naturally harder to spot. His wiry build meant less mass to keep warm, requiring less food in field conditions where rations were limited. 3. Perfect environmental match. Simo had spent his entire life in Finnish forests and winters. He knew the terrain, the weather patterns, the way sound traveled in cold air, how snow reflected light. Soviet soldiers from Ukraine or Central Asia were operating in alien conditions. Simo was in his element. 4. Tactical clarity. Unlike many soldiers who struggle with the moral complexity of killing, Simo had absolute clarity. Finland was defending against unprovoked aggression. Every Soviet soldier he killed was one less threat to Finnish independence. This moral certainty prevented the psychological conflicts that degrade many soldiers' effectiveness. 5. Systematic approach. Simo wasn't a natural talent who relied on instinct. He was methodical and scientific. He studied ballistics, wind effects, light conditions. He planned positions carefully. He kept detailed mental notes on what worked and what didn't. He continuously refined his technique based on results. 6. Psychological toughness. The ability to lie motionless in minus 40-degree temperatures for hours, then make precise shots under pressure, requires extraordinary mental discipline. Simo never described this as difficult. It was simply what needed to be done. Simo Hayat's story offers several lessons that extend beyond military history. Expertise takes time. Simo didn't become the world's deadliest sniper through talent alone. He spent decades developing his skills through patient, deliberate practice. There are no shortcuts to genuine expertise. Simple can be superior. Simo's iron sights beat Soviet scope rifles because he understood the trade-offs and chose a tool that matched his conditions and technique. The most sophisticated equipment isn't always the most effective. Know your environment. Simo's intimate knowledge of Finnish forests and winter conditions gave him decisive advantages over better-equipped Soviet forces. Understanding your operating environment matters more than raw resources. Moral clarity enables performance. Simo's absolute conviction about the war's justness allowed him to perform without psychological conflict. When you're certain you're doing the right thing, execution becomes simpler. Systematic beats spontaneous. Simo succeeded to methodical preparation, consistent technique, and disciplined execution. Flashy improvisation makes for good stories, but systematic competence wins in reality. Today, Simo Häyhä is recognized worldwide as the most lethal sniper in military history. His record of 505 plus confirmed kills in 100 days has never been approached, let alone exceeded. Military sniper schools around the world study his techniques. The Finnish Defense Forces use his story and training to illustrate the importance of individual soldier excellence. His preference for iron sights over scopes has been vindicated by modern research showing that, under certain conditions, iron sights can indeed be superior. But perhaps his greatest legacy is demonstrating what one skilled, determined individual can achieve when defending something they believe in. Simo wasn't superhuman. He was 5 feet 3 inches, weighed about 145 pounds, and came from a farming family with no military tradition. He didn't have advanced technology, extensive formal training, or even particularly good equipment by military standards. What he had was skill developed through patient practice, intimate knowledge of his environment, absolute conviction in his cause, and the discipline to execute methodically under extreme conditions. That was enough to stop a Soviet army. The Soviets had called him Belaya Smrt, the White Death. They meant it as a fearful description of an invisible killer in the snow. But the name carried another meaning. In Finnish culture, white represents purity and snow represents home. Simo Häyhä was death that emerged from Finnish soil itself, defending its homeland with lethal precision. He was a farmer who became a legend, a quiet man who created terror in enemy ranks, a soldier who killed over 500 men and then returned to farming, living peacefully for 60-plus more years. Simo Häyhä, the White Death, history's most lethal sniper, a Finnish farmer who proved that one person with skill, conviction, and discipline can change the course of battles. His story is remarkable not because it's exaggerated or embellished, but because every detail is verified historical fact. Sometimes reality doesn't need fiction to be extraordinary. Sometimes a small man from a small country armed with an old rifle and absolute determination is enough to stop an empire. If you found this story as incredible as I did researching it, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We cover real historical stories that are so extraordinary they seem impossible. But unlike fictional tales, every detail here is verified and true. Simo Häyhä lived until 2002. There are photos of him in old age, interviews where he discusses his experiences, and extensive military records documenting his service. His story isn't legend, it's history. And sometimes, history is more amazing than any fiction could ever be.